And here we go. We are live tonight, Wednesday night. It's movie night here on Kicking the Seat. And we're going to be talking about the latest. Well, I don't want to call it a blockbuster, and I don't want to call it a flopbuster because I don't think the ink is quite
Flopbuster.
dried yet on the results. But yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem came out this past weekend. And, the combined might of the Ninja Turtles and the Meg were still not enough to knock Barbenheimer out of the top spots. 3 weeks strong, those films are going. So, and Ninja Turtles came in fourth behind the Meg. So I don't know what's going on here, but we're going to figure it out. I am, as always, Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, and joining me tonight is Mark on a half shell, the movie man, Crowdcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room podcast, which you can catch every Monday night live with Mark and me on his channel, on his YouTube channel, talking about movies. And we're going to be talking about a movie tonight that I had very little expectations going into. We'll see if those expectations were surpassed or met or I'm curious to see what you think, Mark. So I think it's gonna be a good conversation. But first of all, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Busy. Took a little bit of last week off, but of course I still had a lot of reviews to do, and I caught up a little bit there. And I was going to take this month easy, but we know how that goes. So, but I'm doing all right. We're keeping it together. So
slowing down means you're just spending a full-time amount on movies. I'm glad we're talking Ninja Turtles. It was kind of a special place in my heart, this film, because I took my youngest, and this was his first time seeing a movie in 3D.
Oh, that's awesome. You saw it in 3D. That's cool.
Well, I saw it all in 3D. He took off his glasses about maybe 20 minutes into the movie. And the strange thing is, because he was like, Dad, I don't want to watch this in 3D anymore. I was like, but it's going to look all weird. And he's like, no, it doesn't. So I took off my glasses and it looked fine. Like, they didn't have that blurriness or anything. Really? I guess the technology has just come so far that, it's kind of okay now.
It might be the animation too. I mean, if you look way back at it, the old school days of the red and blue, I remember, and I'm really old. So in Milwaukee, we used to have convenience stores called Open Pantry, and they were just a local convenience store, basically, like you buy, eggs, your basic stuff there and that a little bit. But they had a deal with the independent channel 18 at the time. And where I was going with this is they were showing, I think it was it wasn't King Kong. It was Mighty Joe Young. They were showing the original Mighty Joe Young, but they were doing it in 3D. So they basically did the blue and red. So you could get the glasses at Open Pantry, the blue and red lenses, to get it in 3D, this old black and white public domain film. But if you watched it, where I was going with it is, if you watched it without the glasses, you had a little bit of the red and blue around the edges, but you could still watch it. So
yeah, I remember those days. We're not that dissimilar. We're closer than age than you're letting on, sir. But I mean, the technology now, there used to be those cardboard glasses, right? Which were, kind of cool and now definitely collectible. But now they got full on like plastic glasses that you recycle afterwards and all that good stuff. So yeah, I really think, you don't have to see this movie in 3D. And looking at the trailers, you might think, it's just this weird 2D kind of like sketch drawn hybrid animation. What does it matter if it's in 2D or 3D? It does make a little difference if you're watching it in 3D. It just makes it much more vibrant. I thought it was really neat.
I imagine it probably looked normal without the glasses because of the way they did the animation. So they probably were able to work it into the animation versus a live action 3D where you can't. They probably manipulated the images in such a way to where if you don't watch it with the glasses, you could still see it all right.
Yeah, and in solidarity, I watched big stretches of this movie without the glasses on. Then for the big climactic fight, I know you're going to be asking which one. I had my son put his glasses back on, like, you're not going to want to miss this. This does we're not getting into spoilers yet, but I would say this does suffer a bit from the Return of the King syndrome, where you've got like one big climactic battle, and then there's another one, and now they got to go across town to do this other big fight. So the hour and 39-minute runtime, you definitely feel it in parts. But yeah, before we get into our thoughts on the movie, let's talk a little bit about our history with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mark, you're a little bit, and this is not a slight, I'm just trying to set the table. You're a little older than me.
No, that's no
So
slight at all. I'll own it. That's fine.
so I don't know, like, were you in the window of turtle fandom, at least in terms of the cartoon and the toys? Were you aware of the comics? Because those were like the very early 80s.
I discovered the comics after the cartoon.
Mhm.
I
Me too.
remember the date. I remember the day distinctly. Go back with me. Doodle, doodle, doodle. Back in the day, I'm at the cottage. It's my dad's weekend to have me. We're out there, and I'm flipping through the channels. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm watching, my one cartoon, and all of a sudden, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja, and I went, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, there's a cartoon called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles." He's like, "Bullshit." I'm like, "No, there's a cartoon called Teenage Mutant." I watched it and I loved it. Now, I didn't get into the heavy fandom at the time. I enjoyed the cartoon. That's mostly my experience with it early on, was just the cartoon. And after that, I discovered later on it was based off the comic. And I read one or two comics because I was into comics at that time, but I didn't read it. It wasn't on my regular like pull list or anything. I enjoyed it. It was quirky. I just didn't quite get into it.
Yeah.
As far as the comic, I did watch the cartoon quite a bit until I got a little bit older. And then, that's during the whole cable renaissance. And you started getting 24-hour Cartoon Network and all these other things, and it kind of get lost, I think, in the shuffle after that. But I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And then they did the live action 1990 film, which I love. I really still, it's got a little special place in my heart. The first two especially. So, and so I was familiar with the movies. I've gone to all the movies and read some of the comics. I wasn't like a huge fan, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it because it's definitely something different.
Oh yeah. I remember, I want to say it was my 11th birthday. I got a number of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures from my friends. And so I'm opening them up at my birthday party and I'm like, what the hell is this? Because this still holds today in terms of trends. Like, I got into Pearl Jam like 10 years after they were cool. Um, so I didn't know what a Ninja Turtle was, but it was like, oh,
Sure,
that's kind of
sure.
cool. And it was, Playmates did a great job in those original
Oh
figures.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But my friends were like, "Oh yeah, it's this great cartoon show," and so I started watching the cartoon, and then I wanted all the
Mhm.
figures, and I became kind of obsessed. And then yeah, later on, I learned about the comic book. And I never really gave it a chance. I would read sporadic issues. I picked up, I
Mhm.
think, like the Donatello one shot, and I would flip through some of the original comics as I came across them. But this past summer, when I was on vacation, I I read IDW put out this giant
Oh
reprint
yeah.
of the
Mhm.
first several issues of
Sure.
the Eastman and Laird comics, and they are so good. I mean,
Mhm.
they thought about these comics. First of all, it's a couple of like, college age kids, barely just like drawing stuff in their,
Yeah.
their apartment living room, like probably on TV trays, and it shows in the best way. They're like, we can do anything we want. We're going to make
Mhm.
these comic books into movies. They're just dynamic storyboard type of feel, crazy mutants, outer space, interdimensional figures, and these wonderful characters that evolved and changed, of course, through the different media. Like the cartoon show
Mhm.
is very different than the original
Yeah.
comics, and the movies are different than the cartoon show. And then the other cartoon shows are different than the movies and the original cartoon shows. There have been so many different iterations of the Turtles that it's hard to pin down like what the Ninja Turtles are, because you could say, well, the comics are sacrosanct, but then you miss certain aspects of the cartoon
Mhm.
show, like Krang being a villain, the interdimensional brain from Dimension X or whatever. I was stunned to find out that he was not like the big world conquering antagonist. He was kind of a sympathetic, he and his race of brains were sympathetic
Sure.
characters originally. And then Shredder's all different and stuff. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Ninja Turtles. at least the concept of them and
Mhm.
various aspects of the iterations. I even liked, don't tell anyone, the Michael Bay version, the first one. I never saw the second one. I don't know why. Probably because
See,
I was one and done with that Michael Bay thing, because I thought it was fun, but turtles with lips kind of freaked me out.
the with the Michael Bay turtles, I actually enjoyed the second one more than the first one. Because the second one felt a little bit more with the spirit of what I was used to with like the cartoon and when I was introduced with turtles. You know, the it was a little bit more out there than like the first one. You know, from what I remember, I didn't like the huge the oversized turtles was really hard to get past with Bay turtles. But
Yeah.
the second one, which did have, I believe, Craig in it, and that, if I'm remembering correctly, been a while since I watched it, that one definitely felt more like a bit more like the cartoon comics versus the first one, which felt more like Michael Bay brings you Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. You know, Teenage
Yeah.
Mutant Ninja Turtles by Michael Bay, just like Transformers were by Michael Bay. They weren't your Transformers; they were Michael Bay gives you Transformer, you know, Bay
And
forwards. So
yeah, and that's the thing is
Mhm.
like, you know, the Transformers live action universe has gone steadily, I think, downhill over the
Mhm.
decades. But I really liked that first Transformers from '07, the Michael Bay
Mhm.
version. And I think that's kind of the thing. It's like, let's see what he can do with this franchise. Okay, maybe we'll give him another one. We don't need like 8 sequels, right? You know, we get the idea of what you have to say, Michael. But so we bring in now that kind of brings us, we've skipped over a few iterations because frankly I haven't seen a lot of them. I know there was a 3D animated turtles back in like '06. That might have even predated the Michael Bay ones, right?
Yeah, there was I know it was a big deal because at one point in the I think it's the early aughts, and again, I'm not up on the turtles history, so I'm sure I'm misplacing this, but it was just before I think the Bay Turtles, Nickelodeon actually got the rights to it, and they came out with their version of Turtles. I mean, Turtles has been through so many different reconstructions and iterations over the years, and different cartoons and comics, and I think that shows you the malleability of these characters because they're so outrageous in concept. You can do just about anything with them. But Nickelodeon did come out one for a while, which was very more kid, and the animation was wonky with that one. I think that was just after TMNT came out, but before Bay Turtles or somewhere in between. I forgot. It's hard to say because there's been so many. They've been around since late '80s, early '90s, as far as in video
Yeah, it's
medium.
over.
Yeah,
Right, and they've been around as a property for, you know, over 40 years at this point.
right.
Um, so I guess that brings us to when I first saw the trailers for the new Ninja Turtles. I heard they were making one, but then immediately when it said "from the mind of Seth Rogen," I was like, I'm out. You know, I have not been a fan
Yeah.
of Seth Rogen's animated, you know, like Sausage Party
Oh.
and some of the other stuff. It's like I don't want to see, the turtles are not sophomoric. Yes, they are sophomores in terms of age, but they're not like, you know, poop
Hmm.
and, you know, pee and sex jokes and all that stuff. At least not the Seth Rogen brand. I was shocked because it's a family film. This, you know,
It
Mutant
is.
Mayhem is
Mhm.
not, it's not a PG-13 movie. It's not, you know, I'm not going to dig on Barbie too much, but it, you know, Barbie is very much advertised as, it's like, oh, it's all big and pink, and like, why wouldn't you bring your 5-year-old daughter to see it when it's got like, you know, PG-13, you know,
Humor and
politics
themes
and
and such. Yeah, yeah,
right, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that's gonna, you know,
Hmm.
after you get over the Barbie Land sequence,
Hmm.
it's gonna go into some heavier stuff. You're like,
Hmm.
what's the
Right.
patriarchy, mommy?
Hmm.
There's no deconstruction, there's no, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
weird stuff
Hmm.
in this movie. It's just a family turtles movie. Which I think there are some, you know, kind of double entendres and some like juvenile, like you know, teenage high school jokes, like because
Hmm.
these turtles are in high school or high school age. But I think it's, you know, appropriate. And I had a great time with this movie. I don't know how you, what's your overall like feeling of this new incarnation?
I was entertained. In my review, I didn't give it quite 4. My oldest, who's 23 now, 22. Jeez, I'm old. Anyway, he's 23 now. he enjoyed it. He gave it 4 out of 5 because he rates them. Go figure. My kid does reviewing too. At least to me, we discuss and cuss. I didn't give it quite 4, but I was entertained. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You know, I realized the demographic and who it is made for. You know, like you said, it's definitely a family orientated film. It's definitely made for a wide audience. Which is nothing wrong. I'm not using it as a slight. It's just, you know, and so not all the jokes, some of the jokes kind of made me not cringe, but roll my eyes a little bit. You know, some of the things they were doing, I was like, okay, because I'm like, they're teenagers. I like that. I think, you know, I wasn't blown away, but I was entertained. I was smiling. I enjoyed it. I appreciated some of the decisions they made. Some of the decisions they make before we get into spoilers were a surprise. There's some things that I wish they had approached a little bit different. While I know it did, you know, that the Turtles over the years have suffered a little bit from what we can call the Batman syndrome of their origin story. I do like, you know, kind of their origin story, the way it's been presented, like since the 1990 Turtle movie, and it made sense and it helped set things up more. How they did it here, and I think if anything, it's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I think of all the iterations I've watched, and my son agreed with me on this, is that their training in that is the least ninja of the version of Ninja Turtles that we have gotten. And it's fine. I'm just saying that from where I'm from, you know, the kind of older school origin, it made a little bit more sense to where with this one, they really focused more this time than previous iterations on the teenage aspect of our
Yes.
turtles, more so than being the overall trying to be ninja warriors in that aspect of the turtles that pretty much every other movie has done up until now. These are definitely, they focus definitely more on their teenagers that just happen to know martial arts.
The teenagerness and the mutantness,
Right,
for sure.
yeah, and the mutantness, yeah.
And I'm gonna throw on the spoiler banner just because I think we're about to get into it. So
Yeah.
yeah, folks, you're being warned right down at the bottom of the Chiron. And I think I want to kick off with the since we're kind of talking about the origin and where this could go. I mean, I don't know if this is going to get a sequel or not because it's kind of
They've
underperforming.
already discussed a sequel and a spin-off show, but
they have discussed, yes, but as
yes.
we've seen, particularly this summer, hey, remember when on Saturday, June 17th, Warner Brothers is like, oh, we are all go for Flash 2. We're talking with James Gunn. He's going to work it into his plans. But no, I think with this, if there were to be a sequel, it only had like a budget of, I think, $70 million.
Yeah, it was not an expensive film by any means.
Right. So it doesn't have quite the hill to climb to become profitable as some of the other movies we've discussed this summer. So maybe there's a chance. I don't know if there'll be a demand. I mean, I would like it if more people saw this, especially maybe in the second weekend and third, because there's not a whole lot coming out, like big names, especially in family entertainment in the next couple of weeks. So this might find an audience gradually, I think, with some positive word of mouth. But in terms of sequel possibilities, I like that you keyed in on they don't really focus on the ninja aspect of it. I mean, previously Splinter was mutated, but he was the son or he was the pet rat of like a martial arts master, and that's how he got his skills, and he passed those on to the turtles, which is, you know, it's a cool, it's kind of goofy, but it's still cool. In this one, Splinter and the Ninja Turtles all learn their skills from watching a hodgepodge of like karate, ninja, kung fu, you know, martial arts, you know, videotapes in the sewers and stuff. What I think, and this is where it gets to the post-credits scene, they tease Shredder. Yes, Shredder is not the villain in this movie. In fact, he only shows up. You see, it's very much like a Thanos reveal where you see like part of the back of him, like looking out of New York City. I think that if they were to do a sequel, introduce Shredder, you could have someone who really is a martial arts master coming up against these kids who think, wait, you think you guys are ninjas? And they all have their
Mhm.
asses handed to them, and maybe they actually have to learn and train and get disciplined in
Right.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that angle. And I think that's where they were going with it. It's not a bad thing. It just was a little bit taking a little getting used to, because part of the appeal for me was always watching them being able to kick a lot of ass, and they still do kick a lot of ass in this. Don't get me wrong. I mentioned it in my review. My favorite sequence is this montage scene where they're going after 4 different crime bosses. And it's a wonderful, it's my favorite sequence out of the whole film as far as action sequences go. I just love how that whole thing played and how they handled it. It was wonderful. That was so Turtles, the way that that was done, you know. So and I'm not expecting them to be full experts. It was a bit, it took a little getting used to that. I'm like, oh, we're focusing more on awkward teenage aspect of the story versus, oh, they're teenagers who could also kick some major ass focus.
And I think that keeps in with the entire theme of the movie. This is like the Batman Begins of the Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even though like it starts with kind of a flashback sequence, Baxter Stockman is sort of the main. He's not even really the villain, which is kind of a surprise because in the cartoon show, and I didn't get that far in the comics, so I don't know past Compendium 1 if he becomes like the Fly Guy, but
He
in the
does. I
cartoon
think he
show,
does. Yeah, he does become the Fly Guy, I think, because in the cartoon, in the video game, the good video game, not the NES video game, the first NES video game, that was painful to play. But the stand-up arcade version,
oh, so much fun.
oh, so much fun. But I believe Baxter Stockman in that one was the Fly
Okay.
version.
So in this movie, it opens with this group of kind of like paramilitary guys going to sort of a new, like maybe a Brooklyn, like brownstone, where this guy has his lab, and it's Baxter Stockman, voiced by Giancarlo Esposito. Things go horribly wrong. There's an explosion. He's been raising or doing experiments, and he's got these mutants, you know, like little animals in jars and stuff. There's an explosion. Everything goes haywire. He's pronounced dead. And then we flash forward 15 years, and the Ninja Turtles are 15 years old because that was the explosion that like mutated them and gave them life, I guess. Um, but I thought that Baxter Stockman was going to, you know, show up as the
Right.
Fly villain, but it's not. It's a fly that he was keeping in his lab that got mutated, who considers Baxter Stockman to be his father, which was kind of an interesting idea. And then we have the parallel of Splinter, who's the father of the Ninja Turtles. Now, he had some terrible experiences with humankind, you know, starting out as just a New York City sewer rat, and then he gets mutated, so he becomes a freak who's trying to take care of these turtles. He brings them up to the above world and is like mercilessly chased and attacked by people. So he's like, all right, that's it. People are scum. We're going to live underneath the ground. You guys can go out on errands and stuff, but you have no interaction, you know, with the outside world. You're certainly not going to protect them. And then meanwhile, you've got Superfly, as he's called, voiced by Ice Cube,
He
who is
stole the
like,
show.
oh my God, he was so good. And we'll get into him in a bit, but I'm just trying to lay out the plot. He's got a plan. No, it's fine. I'm bouncing all over the place. So he's got the same plan as Reese Ifans' version of the lizard from the Amazing Spider-Man had, which is basically, I want to turn the entire planet into mutants. Or he wants to mutate all the non-human life forms on the planet, thus killing / enslaving mankind because of how terrible they've been to him. He had a parallel story to Splinter. So a lot of the so-called evil mutants that we've seen from the cartoons, like Bebop and Rocksteady and the whole cast, they're still his thugs, his henchmen, but he's been taking care of them in the same way that Splinter has. Just they have kind of, it's like a Professor X and Magneto version of humanity, although Professor X, you know, still liked people, but Magneto didn't. In this case, both of our protagonists and antagonists can't stand people, but one's like, we'll just stay over here away from the spotlight, and the other guy's like, screw it, we're going to kill everybody. I love that dichotomy.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how they approached that, how they had very similar, and I liked that it was a surprise in a nice way of their approach with Superfly, because I was wondering how they were going to do it, because the way they set up this guy as being the big villain and hiring goons to basically steal parts for his ultimate ray gun that was going to mutate all the creatures in the world. You know, I liked that they both had, you know, because it helped give a little arc to Splinter in this that we hadn't quite seen maybe before, as far as his attitude towards people, because Splinter up until here usually is portrayed as just the smart sensei who, you know, is guiding the kids, knowing he can't completely restrict his teenagers, but he guides them the best. But you know, just don't be seen. That's the whole point of them being ninjas, was since they're mutants, they should be ninjas so they can't be seen by people because people might get scared. In the past, that's what it was. Here, he's not liking people because people get scared of them, you know, might get scared of them. And that's the whole thing, is the, you know, you get that teenager story. Even they're talking about how the turtles want to be seen as heroes because they have this talent and save. They're being looked at as villains. You can look at that as just real world teenagers looking for acceptance somewhere in the world. So, you know, you've got that parallel. I know I'm probably making lake out of a puddle, but you've got that
No.
parallel. Even though they're talking mutants, if you just remove the word mutant and just make teenager, they're pretty much, and that's where this aspect of the story is far more focused than previous iterations, in that it's about acceptance. These guys want to be accepted for who they are. They need their place, much like all of us were at some point as teenagers, trying to find your place and who you are in the world, because, you know, they're a little confused on who they are because things are changing. One of them is starting to have feelings for who they run across, April, you know, because they are teenagers. At least one of them's he's a little more mature than the others. So, you know,
Yeah.
He has very early, like preteen stuff, like, ooh, we held hands type of deal
Right.
approach. Not like,
And,
yeah.
well, and there's that restraint, like, because I can imagine Seth Rogen, like Sausage Party or whatever, Seth Rogen getting a hold of that, and like having a bunch of like premature ejaculation and boner jokes. But no, it's very sweet, and we'll get to April O'Neil in a moment because I got a lot to say about her in this movie, and it might surprise some viewers. But no, I what I like is the nuance of they don't want to be heroes out of some sense of nobility, at least not in
Right.
the beginning of the movie. They just want to be accepted, and they figure if
Mhm.
they do something courageous, then people will like them. They just want to be
Mhm.
liked, and they want to be able to go out in public and meet people and not be, you know, spit at. There's a great scene where there's like a movies in the park, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off is playing, and they're watching that and seeing all the people kind of groove to it, and the Ninja Turtles are on the way back from an errand and they're sneaking around, but they stop to watch part of this movie. And there's just this wistfulness, like, oh, I wish I could be a part of that. And it's, you know, the unpopular kid in high school who sees, like, goes to a basketball game and sees everybody cheering on the athletes and the cheerleaders and stuff. And like, why can't I be a cool kid? Maybe I'm projecting, but
Yeah.
but there's a sweetness to it that I
Mhm.
was not expecting, and I like the fact that the 4 voice actors are actual teenagers, and they're,
Teenagers, yeah.
as far as I know, they're unknowns. Now they might be huge stars, and I'm just unaware of it because I'm, you know, 35 years old and older than they are. But, you know, in the 1990 version, like, Corey Feldman was the voice of Donatello, so it's like,
Mhm.
"Hey, Mikey," and I'm like, no, these guys sound and act like teenagers, and that might be
Right.
grating to some, but I think here they find that right sweet spot of naivete, wanting to be more mature than they are, but just overall kind of good and trying to figure things out awkwardly. They're not weapons experts like Donatello's point, like, my weapon is literally a stick. What can I do with this? And he figures it out.
He does figure it out. I mean, they these are not seasoned hero fighters, or even in their training. They've
Well,
kind of
let's back that up.
huh.
Not seasoned. Okay. Because it sounded almost like you said these are Nazis and hero fighters.
Oh, sorry. No, these are seasoned, not seasoned warriors like we had seen in the past, who have done their training and are experts. They've done their training via TV. So yeah, it's one of those things where they're not fully sure of even the capabilities that they have. They've had this training, but they have not tried it. And that's where it kind of echoed back to the 90 version, to where, they had wanted to get out and do something and do some butt kicking because they had those skills, and they finally do it. And that's that. This one really borrows from some of the previous movies, some of the good stuff from the previous movies, and works it in here. Like, their first fight, that was feeling very similar to what you had in the 90s one. There's a few other aspects of the Turtles that feel like they pulled from the other movies as well, as far as their like whole arc. And yeah, it works. I found it funny that they picked Ferris Bueller as their movie in the park to watch. I'm like, okay, now you're just talking to the old folks in the audience, because most kids are gonna go, okay. Well, the parents are gonna go, Ferris Bueller, that's cool. Yeah, and they have that discussion about Ferris Bueller, which is a discussion that some of us had when we first watched it, going, wow, I'd love to take over a parade.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, I definitely felt my age, but it was a strange feeling because there are a number of references in this movie that I'm sure will land with the target demographic and people who are slightly
Right.
older. References like, oh, I've heard of that TV show, or I've heard of that song or that
Mhm.
actor. And I realize, oh, this is, if I were, 15, 16, I'd be like, oh my God, it's amazing. And now I'm just like, oh, this is for them, but I can still
Mhm.
enjoy it. And I just kind of got this heartwarming feeling. I'm like, this is what I felt like when people were watching Tarantino movies back in high school, and they'd reference, crime pictures that I grew up watching. So it's kind of nice to see this, a Ninja Turtles for a new
Mhm.
generation. And I think that's where some purists might be getting caught up. Like, they changed the origin around. Like, again, Shredder is integral to the origin of the Turtles in the comics and in the
Mhm.
cartoon show and the other iterations, but he's not even really seen in this movie. I'm fine with that. But I do want to talk about one of the major changes, which was April O'Neil. Now, she is another in a very long line of race-swapped redheads in movie properties. The journey to the big screen has not been kind to our ginger kin. And I
Wow,
kind
you're
of wrote,
right. It is a trend with red. You're right. That is, wow.
oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah. And I rolled my eyes, I'm sure, as with, 90% of Turtles fans when they announced that, April O'Neil is no longer going to be the buxom redhead. But, and I gotta say, when she first showed up on screen, there's I have to be a bit ungenerous here, because my opinion, much like the character, has an arc. When we first see April O'Neil, she's having trouble with her scooter. She's like having some issues in traffic. The Ninja Turtles kind of spot her from the top of a brownstone, and Leonardo immediately gets a crush on her, and that begins this whole thing. But
Well, they threw a
when we
ninja star and it's stuck in her helmet.
that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah, it's stuck. They
And
were
then
throwing
someone
ninja
tries to
stars.
steal her
Yeah.
scooter, right?
Right.
There's so much that happens in
Yeah.
this movie. You
I
saw
know.
this earlier than I did. I saw it. I was watching this 24 hours ago, and I forgot like some of the key stuff that happened in it.
Oh,
But
sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm glad that you're here to keep me anchored on what actually happened in this film.
Yeah.
But okay, so voiced by Ayo, I'm gonna butcher this, or Ayo Edebiri, who is
Mhm.
an actress who had a bit part, but a great part in a movie called Theater Camp, which is also out this
Mm.
summer,
Mhm.
which I recommend, especially for her role. She's hilarious. But she voices a version of April O'Neil who, frankly, when I first saw her, I'm like, they really seemed to go in the complete opposite direction of previous iterations
Mhm.
of April O'Neil. Even going back to the comics, which I know there was some controversy when her, I guess, casting, because I don't know how you
Mhm.
cast a cartoon character visually, but people were saying, oh no, she was always black. Because if you look at some of the coloring on the covers of the old
Mhm.
Ninja Turtles comics, she didn't look like she didn't look like April
Right.
from the cartoon. Other people said no, she was based on a Puerto Rican girlfriend of either
Mhm.
Eastman or Laird, and some people are like, yeah, but not in terms of race, but in terms of personality. So it's this whole convoluted thing. But she was not portrayed as the stereotypical, you've got April from the comics, April from the 90s cartoon, Megan Fox, hello, from the Michael Bay movies. She April in this movie is sort of a potato shaped, crazy hair, grungy kind of outfit, like almost like sloppily put together, urban teen. And I was like, what are we doing here, guys? By the end of the movie, I was completely like, okay, not in love with April O'Neil, but I
Mhm.
like was really rooting for her, and I thought she was
Mhm.
a great character because when we meet her, she is really kind of down in the dumps and unsure about her life.
Mhm.
She's a high school student. She is an aspiring journalist who has the nickname April O'Puke, I think, or Puke
Yeah,
Girl,
Puke Girl or
because
April O'Puke. Yeah.
right, because she had her big shot to be an on-air, like, on the student TV news announcements, and she threw up spectacularly and became a meme. And she also got prom canceled through some how did she get prom canceled? I can't
No,
remember.
she didn't get prom canceled. Prom was canceled because of the crimes going on in the city,
Okay.
because there were such dramatic extravagant like heists and that these dangerous folks they felt were in and around the neighborhood, that they were putting in a curfew. And since they were putting in a curfew because of all these heists by Superfly's goons that he hires, not the mutants goons, but just regular goons,
Right.
they were putting a curfew, which ended up canceling prom. So
That's what it was. I
yeah.
I was getting confused because she had a solution to get back in the good graces of the
Right.
students, because she figured out when she once she teams up with the turtles, she's like, "Look, you guys wanna bring down these, these criminals." As far as they knew, they were just criminals. They didn't really hadn't caught on to Superfly and his mutant gang
Right.
yet. But, like, "You guys stop them. I'll chronicle it. I'll write about it. We'll get video. We'll put up on blogs, and then we'll all be heroes, and then will can uncancel prom, and
Right.
then maybe I'll get this whole movie, like, all the characters just want to be accepted in some way, and it's such
Hmm.
a positive message about, like, the different ways you can ingratiate yourself into, making new friends and expanding kind of your networks of social influence that, again, I wasn't expecting this. But yeah, by the end of the film, she is not out there like with swords and ninja stars and stuff like taking down the mutants, but she is playing a key role in helping to turn the tide of public opinion. Because once all the mutants show up, the Ninja
Hmm.
Turtles get lumped in with the bad guy and his army of mutants, and she goes on TV and she's like, "No, here's the whole story." So there's again different levels of heroism. You don't have
Hmm.
to be out there in the field fighting people. You can help in other ways. And yeah, I also like that again, this is an origin story. So if there are other movies, April O'Neil can mature and blossom like well, but her confidence at the end of
Right.
the film, I would have to go back and watch this again, but I feel like maybe I'm projecting or something, but I felt like she was like sitting up straighter, like
Hmm.
felt
No,
a
she
little bit
was.
more
Yeah.
put together,
Hmm.
right? Like not as hopeless looking. So I'm thinking like if the next one takes place like 5 years later and she's working at like a TV station or something as a
Hmm.
young anchor, she might look closer to the April O'Neil we know and love. Even if she doesn't, I mean that's fine because I think her personality is awesome.
Yeah, I really liked what they did with her character, and I think it's one of those things where you have um, certain characters who have had different iterations over the years. Um, for a bad analogy, but like your Bruce Wayne had a specific version of Alfred depending on what movie. Just like the cartoons, your April O'Neil version kind of is meant to complement the version of the turtles that you have.
Mm,
And hers is a good, excellent complement, a good fit with the turtles that we have. I think if they would have gone a different direction, it wouldn't have worked as well because they usually tend to be all on the same level of some sort. You know what I mean? Like usually the April that we are introduced to, like in the '90s, they're fighting to become a journalist still. So they're still trying to find, try to look for that big break. And that kind of complements where your turtles are, and it's the same thing here. So yeah, I liked what they did with her character quite a bit. The voice acting was good. I liked how she was written um quite a bit, and her arc. It was fun. I was rooting for her at the end. quite a bit, and I was smiling for her especially. And I thought it was very cool with the whole media thing angle that they took, because there is commentary in here about media and opinion
Mm-hmm.
and social media. I mean, you get the, and that's done through April. April is used as the voice, if you will, for your commentary, or putting the mirror in front of you for social media, and how easily people get lumped into something and it's assumed. I mean, if you're missing this message underneath this family movie, you're not paying attention, because they literally lump the turtles into this group of bad individuals who are running rampant across the city, and they paint these folks as the same as those folks because they're all mutants. And if you don't pick up on it, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? So there is some of that underneath, but I mean, it's a hot topic amongst the young today. So it's not like this is something that old folks came up with to be a topic. This is a hot topic that's among 20 somethings and younger today. They're very much aware of perception in social media and how it can change your opinion very quickly with the public,
Right.
one way or the other.
Right. I think one way or the other is the key, because especially, what I know of Seth Rogen and his politics, I was very
Right.
surprised to not see the, the news coverage of it was very realistic in that,
Yeah. Mhm.
it's a bunch of mutants showing up, running across the city, and then here's like four of them. It looks like they could be in league with them, so whatever, but it's not like this kind of, it's not like they're on Fox News or something like that,
No,
or
it's just
going one way
news.
there.
Yeah.
But because I think the importance is, it's just a great life lesson for kids. Like, don't believe
Mhm.
everything you see on television. There's always more to a person than what they look
Mhm.
like or what they're perceived to be doing. And that's why I think this isn't just a fun adventure family film. There are lessons in it that remind me of what I
Yes.
would watch on like Saturday morning cartoon shows.
Yeah.
I also talking about like the weird arcs April has had. Yeah, I didn't realize this but in the original Eastman Laird comics, she was Baxter Stockman's assistant at
Yeah.
TCRI.
Mhm. Yeah.
Talk about
Yeah. Uh-oh. Ian froze.
okay.
Oh,
I'm back now.
you're back. Hey, all right, cool.
All right.
But yeah,
Um,
that is a dramatic change from going from his assistant to being the journalist that everybody has been associated with her with. So,
right.
but yeah, I think she fit well in here. I like how they wrote her. Um, I like how she's starting out as well. I think that's a little different than what we've seen before. But it fit the turtles. It helped you take her arc in a similar direction, and it made sense of their pairing.
Right. I don't think I've seen a take on these characters where they're actual like peers in terms of age.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
April's always been like, I would say like at least 10 years older than
Right.
these guys, which is a lot of fun. I do want to mention uh before we get further in, because you're going to start seeing this in the shelf, but I went to AMC, and of course I got the novelty popcorn
Nice.
tin
Yeah.
with the metal sewer cover.
Nice.
And
Nice.
inside that was a collectible cup with a little
Oh,
Michelangelo topper.
oh,
Yeah,
that's sweet.
we
That's
got the
very
last
cool.
one. Yeah.
Nice.
And
Nice.
you know what? Popcorn and soda prices are so expensive that was only about $2 more expensive than just buying a regular drink and
Regular drink.
popcorn.
Yeah. Yeah.
My
Oh
God.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I want to talk a bit about, we kind of danced around it earlier, the visual styling of this movie.
Mhm.
Um, and again, the Seth Rogen thing, but also when I first saw the trailer, I'm like, what is this weird, like knockoff
Mhm.
Spider-Verse animation style? I was so into this by, very shortly into the movie. I was like, I love this. I love it because it's this into the spider or across the Spider-Verse with those movies, the characters still look kind of like idealized versions
Mhm.
of almost like Pixar or Marvel characters. In this film, everybody is grotesque. Like not even just the mutants, but the people. They look like
Mhm.
these oddball, like drunken sketch characters. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think it looked better in the movie than it did in the trailer.
Mhm.
I think they cleaned up some of the graphics, or maybe they got some feedback or something after they did the trailer, because I was kind of concerned when I saw the trailer, because as much as I love different artistic style, and as my son told me, Dad, just because it's animated doesn't mean it's like Into the Spider-Verse. And because I said it's kind of got the spirit of the Spider-Verse. He's like, just because it's animated. I'm like, okay, you got me there. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. But I will say I got concerned when I saw it in the trailer, because I'm like, okay, I'm all for something different, but it almost looks like this style could be a little distracting to me. But I think they cleaned it up, or they at least removed some of like the floating lines like you saw in the trailer around the characters. And yeah, I loved the style of it. I loved the art and the style. You get used to it very quickly. And that's thanks partly, in part to the voice acting and the story that you get into it, that you don't even really pay attention, that all of a sudden you're just watching a movie. The artistic style though approach to it is really cool. I like how they did it. It felt like comic book panels come to life again, in its own style, more like you said, like guys who drew these on TV trays. It was a bit more raw and unpolished, especially when we get to the mutant gang. But even the people, when you get these, would it be Spider-Man or Spider-Man 3 moment or whatever that you get in here? It's the Spider-Man 2 where Brooklyn bands together around Spider-Man.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I'm talking about? You
You
get
mess with
that.
Spidey, you mess with us. Yeah, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Spider-Man 3, I think, that had that. But you get that moment in here, and you get introduced to the New York folks, and yeah, they look like people. They're a bit disfigured in that, but I liked it. I gave it its own identity. You're in a different world than what you've seen in the past, and after a while, you get used to it fairly quickly, to where it doesn't distract you from anything.
Yeah, I mean, I was frequently pulled out of the movie, but in a really good way, because I
Mm,
was just stopped to think, like, when you'd see like average New Yorkers, I don't think
mm.
this is a commentary on New Yorkers or anything, but like
No.
they look like animated versions of real people, not like
Mhm.
very clean kind
Right.
of models, not very cartoony. But there was a Mad Magazine cover artist. I think he did interiors too. Named, I think it was
Mhm.
Victor Waz. If I
Mm.
had that, it was very hard name for me to pronounce, but I loved his stuff because he had that kind of a sketchy, grotesquerie approach to his
Mhm.
caricatures, so that the people looked like, the actor or the politician. But there was also or maybe it was Rolling Stone.
Mhm.
Um, but he captured the essence of it, but it also had this kind of like vibrant animated quality to these still images. You get that pretty much throughout
Mhm.
the entire film. And I love the kind of the opening sequence where it's almost a fake out, where you see the Ninja Turtles like going through the city and jumping from rooftop to rooftop, and then they stand in that heroic pose, and they've got the giant white
Yeah.
eyes like we're used to seeing. It's all very Batman. It's very exciting and very kinetic, and I really can't wait to see this movie again. It'll probably be home video, but yeah, I'm definitely
Yeah.
owning this thing.
Oh, no, it's going to streaming fairly quick, I bet.
No, I
Not
want it
that
to.
not that I would want it to. I'm just saying, given the history, not just of this summer, but of this entire year of films,
Yeah.
I suspect, and maybe that's why you don't have such a big turnout with it being a family oriented film or whatever. Many people now are like, it's noon. Yeah, it'll be on streaming by 6. You know what I mean? I think people may be taking that approach to it, and maybe that's why you don't have quite the box office take with it. But that opening was definitely a spiritual nod to the original opening of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book, the way they were coming from across the rooftop and everything. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here. And you're right. Yeah, it's a wonderful style. They set you up in it, and yeah, you get into the story enough to where it's not jarring, even with our mutants that show up, which we have a plethora of mutants, and they take our fellow mutants that we're familiar with in a different direction. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not quite sure how I feel about a Bebop and Rocksteady being on the face side versus the heel side, but I'm
Here's the thing. I was thinking about this at the end of the movie when they revealed Shredder, because
yeah.
in the cartoon show, which is the iteration I'm most familiar with, they were, you know, his
henchmen.
prime
Yeah.
henchmen along with the foot soldiers. Um, there's all sorts of possibilities. You know, he could tempt them over to the dark side
Yeah.
or whatever. They could get bored with being good guys or something,
Mhm.
especially because they spent their entire lives or it's adult lives under Superfly, you know, stealing stuff and being criminals. Who knows? But I liked that they at least had one villain, the main big bad guy, stay a villain from
Yeah.
start to finish
Mhm.
because so many times Superfly is a sympathetic villain in a way because he's got a very tragic, you know, kind of origin, and he did his best to keep his, you know, kind of found family together. It's just that the world was so cruel to him that he very not easily, but he turned against them, but he doesn't have a 0-hour change of heart. Now, all of his henchmen do, and they kind of team up with the Ninja Turtles, which you're right, is a bit strange to see. I was like, are they faking them out or
Right. Yeah.
what? But I did like that they all teamed up together because Superfly, he gets this super dose of mutagen and basically turns into every animal. One of my favorite, again, we got to talk about Ice Cube, his voice
Oh
acting in this movie.
God.
It's so like one of my all-time favorite animated voice performances, I think, ever. The line where he's like, yo, my foot is horses. I was like, I was dying.
And he just said it in so wonderful awe. Like, yeah, and I mentioned it in my review that he's so good at this. His voice acting helps make this character a lot more than what it could have been, just because of his approach to it. You can tell him taking this approach to it. Um, and you're right, he stays a villain. He's got a Thanos feel to him quite a bit, to where you're listening to him and you can kind of understand his justification. You're like, don't do it, but you at least see where he's coming from on this.
Yeah.
And I liked how I loved the voice acting, though, that he was such a great choice for it. And he just did so well. And even when he was mutant, when he's trouncing around the streets, and the mutant and the turtles think they come up with a solution because there's this subplot with this other kind of villain, who wants to milk the turtles for their mutagen. And that's what Splinter has been telling them. They can't go to the surface because someone will kidnap and milk them. And they're like, yeah, right. But they end up having that exact thing happen. It's wonderful. Like, they're like, wait, are you actually? They're like, oh my God, you know.
So many milking jokes in this movie,
So
but they
many
work.
movies, but they work. But I like the mutant part of it, and how he changed, and how he still was Superfly, though. Even though he was a bigger guy, he did like turn into some dumb, kaiju. He was still Superfly. He was just super mutant Superfly and having fun.
Yeah, I mean, he reminded me of, in a way, like the same character Ice Cube portrayed in Boys in the Hood.
Mm.
You know, he's not like a super genius. He very much is a guy, you know, from the streets. Um, he just felt like very authentic. I wasn't prepared for this approach to the writing and also
Mhm.
the performance. It's a very like nuanced performance as a villain, even more so when we get. I think Thanos is kind of a good comparison here,
Yeah.
which is strange to say about, you know, Superfly in a Ninja Turtles cartoon.
Well, no, but
Um,
it's still with the justification and his motivation. I always, that was one of the things I always liked about the Thanos arc, is that they set him up to where you can kind of see his justification. While you may not agree with his means, you're like, he's got a point, and you're sitting there even with Superfly, who's trying to tell Splinter, hey, I'm like you, we're like of this kind of the same cloth. You feel the same way I do. And Splinter's like, wow, you're right. Damn it. And then Splinter suddenly reevaluates all his life choices. But where I
do
was
you
going before.
you see the
Yeah.
moment on his face, which is
Yeah.
great because Superfly says something about keeping everyone together or keeping
Right.
them hidden or something like that, and he's like,
Mhm.
"Oh my God, I'm part bad guy in this situation." Yeah, it's a wonderful
Yeah.
moment.
But where I was going before with the subplot that they have here, which it's going to play into if they do a sequel with Shredder, because they call Shredder, but you have this one villain who was a competitor of Baxter Stockman, and she wanted his technology to make mutant super soldiers. And her soldiers have anti-mutagen guns. And so where I was going with this is they come up with this great idea. Okay, we'll shoot him with the anti-mutagen gun, and they shoot him, and that's where it hits just his leg, and the horse pops off, and Superfly looks down and he gives a reaction just like, "That's all you got?" Like it's just like he's totally unimpressed.
Yeah. Now the competitor you mentioned who works
Yeah.
for TCRI. Now fans of the comics, I don't know if TCRI featured into the cartoon show so much. I know, but
They weren't
that's
called
Krang's thing, right?
they weren't called TCRI. They were called TGRI, I think. I forgot. And at least in like the anime in the live action film, they weren't called TCRI. I think it was TGRI, maybe. I don't know. But they were called slightly something different, but
Well, but the thing is, like this, the woman who is kind of running it and working in the
Mhm.
shadows and trying to uh, get control of this mutagen, who was what was her name? I think it was Cynthia Utrom, played voiced by
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you notice her glasses? Those weird
Oh yeah,
pink
yeah, yeah.
rectangular
Mhm.
glasses that look kind of like the glasses that a certain body protector of Krang wore at one point.
Mhm.
I was just waiting for her to, it's gonna sound crude, but I was waiting for like open up her shirt and like reveal the brain in there or something.
She's drawn like Krang's uh yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, I was wondering why it looked familiar. She is drawn very similar to Craig's body robot that he had.
And at
Yeah.
the end, if I remember, the TCRI building,
Mhm.
it disappeared, didn't it? Or there was or
Yeah,
was
I think
evacuated, like
it
emptied
was
out. I think it
evacuated.
was
Yeah,
emptied out, right?
it was emptied out.
That's very similar to what happened in the comics,
Mhm.
the Eastman and Laird book. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of deep lore and weird deep cuts all throughout this that kind of touches on aspects that were successful throughout the various incarnations, as you mentioned earlier, making this, I think, a movie that Ninja Turtle fans, if they can get over the fact this isn't your grandfather's Ninja Turtles exactly, can be enjoyed by people old and young. This is, I think, a good gateway into the Ninja Turtles universe because I think, much like us, people are going to discover this movie and then be like, "Oh, wait, there were toys. Wait, there were
Mhm.
comics." You know,
Mhm.
so I think it's all good. It's all fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's far better than what I expected it to be, especially when you say from the mind of Seth Rogen, because Rogen he's very hit and miss with me. Most of the
Hmm.
time he's a miss, but occasionally I do enjoy his stuff. I think one of his best roles was in the Disaster Artist. Even though it was a
Oh
small
yeah,
part, I think
yeah.
even though it was a small part, he was wonderful and I loved him in that role. I like to see a little bit more of him in roles like that, but here he managed to write something fairly surprising that's smartly written and enjoyable. Like I said, I wasn't like completely blown away, but it was entertaining and interesting and something that's going to stand out and continuing the trend of the turtle shows that you get something different from each one. That's the one thing that you get that I will say, I'll throw it out there. Bayformers didn't quite give you, while they gave you new Transformers, it was still all kind of the same visual. It was Bay,
Yeah.
and if you go through the history of the turtles, just like in the comics, the cartoons, and even the movies, all of them have their own identity for whatever world they're in. And I think this one really fits that really well and continues that tradition. And you're right, wonderful gateway. This is one to where fans will pick out enough to go, oh, that's a reference to this, whereas new kids won't be lost to everything being referenced because it's written for a more modern younger audience. So
Right. Um, Now, I just wanted to say briefly, talking about flops, this movie reminded me of a movie that came out earlier this year, like in the spring, Dungeons and Dragons,
yes.
another IP film that I thought was, bright, fun, action packed, really enjoyable, not, cynical. It didn't feel like a product, really,
Mhm.
but it
Well,
also
and
didn't
and that
do
was another
this.
that oh, sorry,
I
go ahead.
was, I was to say it didn't do very well.
Mhm.
That's also considered a flop, and I don't know if we're going to see more of it. And I think that's kind of sad.
It is because that was yet another film as well that you could enjoy whether or not you've played D&D before or not, just like Turtles is made for fans and for new people who may not be familiar at all with the property. Dungeons and Dragons was the same way. That was, yeah, another film. It is boggling what is flopping and what is making for the box office this year. It is so strange, so strange of what's hitting and missing right now. And I wish Dungeons and Dragons would have done better. And this one I'd like to do better because I would like to see a sequel. I'm like, okay, we've explored the teenage part. Now let's get, into the maybe the ninja part a little bit more, get with the shredder, get with the stuff. Again, everything in this film, I didn't have a problem with what was in this film. It was just different, but I'd like to see some of those fun elements that really made these iconic come back, in a sequel or a spin-off show. Even I'd watch this even as a show.
Oh yeah, I would too. Hopefully we'll get some. People have written books on 1982 and 1999 as being like key movie years. I think someone's going to write, give it 10 years, someone's going to write about 2023 and whatever the hell happened this year, because we still have like 4 months to go. Who knows what can happen? And we got an actor's strike and writer's strike, and
who knows what movies are actually going to come out in 2023 that we've been promised were going to come out in 2023, and which ones aren't. They're going to get moved because they can't talk about them because of the strike. I think the last 2 years, I think if anything, there might be books and stuff, and they're probably already all of how Hollywood came out of the pandemic and where we're at in the last 2 years. Because last year, it was like the year of the, for lack of a better term, indie. It was the year of those studios that normally didn't get a chance to maybe distribute their stuff, especially A24 dominated the box office last year because all the big studios were afraid to release their IPs because they weren't sure if people were coming back to the studios. So you got a lot of variety and just weird, interesting stuff you didn't think would be on the big screen anymore was there. This year, we're getting stuff on the big screen, but they're getting scared and they're pulling the stuff so early now to where it's almost the same thing. It's worse because you get teased some of this, and then if it's not a hit right away, they're pulling it and dumping it to their streaming to never gain another buck again.
Well, I think there's a calculation that it's more I'm just speculating, but it's probably more cost effective to yank it from theaters because they got to split that revenue with the theaters, and it costs money to keep these things, showing. They can just put it on their streaming service in a month and home video, and hopefully someone will buy it or rent it or subscribe. And I don't know what the calculations are, but you're right. It's a very weird time. 2023 is so heavy in terms of these blockbusters. Like this summer, it almost feels like, it's like they backed everything up from 2022, and now it's got to come out sometime. But now we've got another similar problem with the strikes going on, and we might have the same issue in 2024. 2025, who knows if we'll have any product because none of that stuff's being worked on right now. My God. Well, Mark, do you have any closing thoughts on Mutant Mayhem?
Mutant Mayhem, a lot of fun. If you're a devout fan, which I was not, but I can see it to where if you're a devout fan, you'll still enjoy it because you'll find enough Easter eggs and references, I think, to enjoy it. It is a family-friendly film if you're looking for something family-friendly at the box office, which doesn't really happen too much anymore. And if it's there, it's gone in a blink. It's something that, very breezy. You could take and enjoy on an afternoon if you want to take the kids or the whole family. There's something there for a lot of people to enjoy. And I think, I think it's a prime example. And while my son would yell at me for it, it's a prime example, though, that Into the Spider-Verse and now Across the Spider-Verse has shown that you can do something other than Disney for your animation or do something other than Pixar for your animation, which I've always felt like Illumination in that I've always been like trying to mimic Pixar in a lot of ways, as far as their style and that goes. And it's showing you can do this differently. Animation is an art style and you can take some chances. And that's what it feels like here. And I think we're seeing that Spider-Verse effect now with studios, not Disney, trying to do animated product. And it gives me hope that we might get animation. I'd love to see animation from other studios versus the 2 or 3 that we've been getting so far. I'd love to see like a independent animated film, or something like this where you know, you've got a different production studio making it, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these things are labor intensive and they take
Oh
years.
yeah.
So, given the current climate of productions being halted, it might be another half decade before we see if studios even choose to invest in this stuff. Because
Mhm.
for every Academy Award winning Into the Spider-Verse, you've got you got Ninja Turtles that came out and didn't perform. So now we're going to be all
Right.
skittish, and the smaller studios or the other studios may be like, you want to take a gamble on a Ninja Turtles style movie? I don't think so.
Mhm.
I'm hopeful though that someone will pick up this baton and run with it or keep running with it because yeah, you're right. We need more variety, more interesting stuff to get us into the theaters because this doesn't look like anything else that I've seen this year.
Mm.
Even like it's in the vein of Spider-Verse, kind of, but it does have that kind of punk rock
Mhm.
drawn on the back of a notebook while you're in class supposed to be paying attention. It does have that original stay hungry kind of feel. So Mark, I'm not gonna keep you. We're not gonna stay here talking about Ninja Turtles. I'm gonna let you go. But I do appreciate you hanging out and talking about this very surprising, very fun movie that I
Mhm.
think if you haven't watched it, if you've been on the fence, hopefully we've encouraged you to watch it, or at least in the first 10 minutes before I went to spoilers, because my God. But anyhow, thanks, Mark.
You're
Mark on
welcome.
the half shell of Special Mark Productions. Check out the Spoiler Room podcast live on Mondays. This month is One Night in Bangkok month. A slate of very interesting films. We just talked about Bangkok Dangerous starring Nicolas Cage the other night, so go check that out. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, and you've been watching our live stream on Ninja Turtles. We didn't quite have the entire gang here, but we had some great company, and yeah. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
I'm rambling because I'm appreciative and I'm tired. This is a bad combination. It's like being
Always.
drunk. But yeah, all right, man. Thank you.
You
Take
bet.
care, and we'll talk about something else soon.
Sounds
Oh, by
good.
the way, like and subscribe to Mark's stuff and our stuff and Oliver's Mightiest Critics. Information down below. I keep forgetting to do these things. So yeah, do all that. Thank you. Take care, and cowabunga. I don't think we heard one cowabunga in
We
this movie,
didn't.
did we?
No, we did not hear a cowabunga. No, we did. There was a cowabunga. I think there was a cowabunga.
Was there?
I think there was one. I'd have to
Oh.
watch it again, but I think there might have been one.
All right.
But there wasn't a totally tubular, so
we'll be on a cowabunga hunt. There was pizza though, so I got to give them that.
Pizza.
All right. All right, man. Take care.